Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello. This is Matt Truman. Thank you for downloading this podcast. Thank you for sharing with a friend. This is episode 71. Today is January the 8th, 2021. On the last podcast, I told everybody that this was going to be a crazy week, and I told you that I was worried about all the people heading down to D.C. I was right. I didn't want to be right. I don't want to be right, but I was. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to let it marinate over the weekend. Nope, today we have a guest. We have on the podcast Aaron Crater. He has worked professionally in the bar and restaurant industry for nearly 15 years. He is the founder of Ohio Bar Hop, advocating for and fighting to save Ohio's service industry, businesses, and workers. He is one of the co-hosts of the Post-Depressor, a panel discussion broadcast that airs on social media following each of Governor DeWine's press conferences to show the other side of what is happening in Ohio. You can follow Aaron's work on both the Ohio Bar Hop on Facebook and Post-Depressor Facebook pages. Aaron, thanks for joining Truman's Town Hall.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, could you give us a little more detail about what Ohio Bar Hop is?
So, Ohio Bar Hop started, I started Ohio Bar Hop back in the end of July, beginning of August. That's when the governor and the Ohio Liquor Control Commission put in the 10 p.m. curfew for alcohol sales across Ohio. I was waiting to see if the Ohio Restaurant Association and the Ohio Licensed Beverage Association were going to come in and speak up for my industry and stand up for us, and they really didn't, and no one else was standing up for the bar and restaurant industry. And I clearly saw the massive amount of damage that was going to happen to my industry with this 10 p.m. curfew. And since no one else decided to stand up and speak out for our industry, I took on the challenge myself, and I founded Ohio Bar Hop.
Awesome.
And here we are today. I'm working with legislators to help create legislation to save our industry, and I go around the state and I travel around and talk to bar and restaurant owners to get their stories out there and show how much this is hurting us.
That's awesome. I think the first time I saw you guys was on the Post-Depressor, and you were actually talking with a bar owner here in where I live in Beaver Creek. You were talking to the Knollwood Tavern. I believe her name was Amy. I haven't spoken to her, but I've been up there. How's she doing? Are they still? They're still
plugging along the best they can. Amy's had a tough year. She took ownership of that bar quite literally on March 15th, the day that Governor DeWine shut the bar and restaurant industry down initially.
Wow.
So she's had an uphill battle this entire year, starting with the first 2 months of ownership of her bar, not even being able to open. So she's been through quite a bit this year, but I think all things considered, she's doing the best she can right now. But we certainly need relief coming up in our industry.
Definitely. A little bit about the 10 o'clock curfew. It was set by the Ohio Department of Health, and then does DeWine just announce that that's what they set, or do you know how that works?
So there's a lot of confusion out there. I'm glad you asked me this question, because there's a lot of confusion about what the 10 p.m. curfew really is. And what we're under right now is a blanket curfew that applies to all businesses. That's a 10 p.m. curfew that's being issued in 21-day increments by the Ohio Department of Health. If you go back to July 31st is when the original 10 p.m. curfew was instated by the Ohio Liquor Control Commission. And that was a 120-day curfew put in by them to stop alcohol sales everywhere in Ohio for consumption of alcohol on premise at 10 p.m. Now, that expired on November 28th. The timing of the current 10 p.m. curfew we're under right now is very curious to me, because he installed this curfew, I believe it was on November 19th. right before the alcohol sales curfew was set to expire. Without going and boring your listeners with too many details about how Ohio law works, because the original 10 p.m. curfew for liquor sales was set in place by a regulatory agency, the Ohio Liquor Control Commission, the law in Ohio only allows them to do a 120-day order on that. And after that 120-day order expires, the governor and that regulatory agency cannot extend that curfew or that order without legislative oversight from the JCAR committee in our Ohio General Assembly.
Okay.
So Governor DeWine knew that he was not going to be able to renew that 10 p.m. curfew for alcohol sales. So to ensure that the bars and restaurants could stay closed past 10 o'clock, which is what he's been trying to do since July, he kind of did a backdoor approach to it. And what he did is he installed a blanket 10 p.m. curfew through the Ohio Department of Health, which they can continue to extend this indefinitely in 21-day periods. Because if you think about all the businesses affected by this, it's a 10 p.m. curfew on every business, but think about the exceptions he's given: grocery stores, pharmacies, things like that. Other than that, really the only businesses, with very few exceptions, that are open past 10 p.m. anyways are going to be bars and restaurants.
Correct.
So it's pretty easy to determine why he instituted the blanket curfew across our state.
Right. And they also extended it for the sporting events, such as the Browns games and things like that. Why do you think the Browns get to play versus the entire state's bar and restaurant industry being able to stay open as late as they normally do?
It's very frustrating. The governor, I'm trying to be as sympathetic to him as possible, but
sure,
I know he's got a lot of pressure from all sides on this, and I do believe the governor's trying to do the right thing most of the time, with the information he has, but I just think he's listening to the wrong people. There's TV contracts involved and other things, with those sporting events, and I understand he doesn't want to shut down sports completely. I get that.
Sure.
What frustrated me is that he gave those sporting events a specific variance in his curfew to allow people to attend those events still. So it's not just the players and the staff that works at those events. It's actually allowing the public to be spectators of these events still. They can still sell alcohol to these people past 10 p.m. because the 10 p.m. alcohol curfew has expired now. And he granted a variance so people could attend these games in person. But you cannot come into a bar or restaurant in Ohio right now and watch these games on television past 10 p.m. So if a game starts at 8 o'clock and may go to 11:30 or close to midnight, right, most people are having to leave about halftime. And the people at the game can still stay there and watch it. And I think it's a huge hit to small business.
Definitely. Who actually enforces this curfew? Because I've read a lot of different places where these bars are being cited, restaurants are being cited for they served a beer after 10 o'clock. It was like 10:05 and stuff like this. Who enforces that? Is that Ohio State Patrol or?
It's a division of the Ohio State Highway Patrol. It's called the Ohio Investigative Unit, and they are a plainclothes, so undercover unit that's a division of the Ohio State Highway Patrol. And their primary law enforcement activity that they engage in is regulating alcohol and tobacco, sales restrictions and laws. So before all COVID started, they would come in and make sure bars weren't selling to underage people and that,
right,
convenience stores weren't doing that as well. Now they're primarily focused on coming in and enforcing the COVID mandates and regulations that the governor has put in place.
Okay.
And the health department can do this as well. Health departments across the state are coming into bars and enforcing these regulations as well. But it's mainly the Ohio Investigative Unit. Some local law enforcement agencies are engaging in this activity as well at bars, but it's pretty rare because for the most part across Ohio, local law enforcement has enough to deal with, and they really don't want to be bothered with these COVID restrictions placed on businesses.
Yes, I think I've heard from, I believe it was the Warren County Sheriff, who said that they were not going to be enforcing this. And that's just one of the law enforcement agencies I've heard of. The curfew is supposed to expire on the 23rd. Do you anticipate Governor DeWine's going to extend that?
At this point, I do. I was really waiting to see what was going to happen on January 2nd when the second curfew that he just renewed expired. And our thinking in the restaurant and bar industry was that if he was going to lift it, that would be the time for him to lift it, because he definitely didn't want people gathering in the bars and restaurants during the holidays. He made that very clear.
Right.
And we thought if he was going to lift it at any point, it would be immediately after the holidays, especially coming into January and February, which are typically slow months for the bars and restaurants anyways. So you're not going to have high demand for people to be gathering in large numbers at bars and restaurants. So we thought that was probably going to be the time he would lift the curfew, if he was going to at all. So the fact that he renewed it just tells me he has no plans to lift this curfew on the 23rd at all. He'll most likely renew it again.
Right. Yeah, that's my guess as well. I think he's going to extend it. Now, we talked about the Knollwood here in Beaver Creek. What are you hearing from these bars and restaurants? Is there a lot of them hurting? Are there closures? What are you hearing out there?
Oh, certainly. Across the state, we have seen massive number of closures of bars and restaurants since March of last year when the pandemic first hit us. And, it's hard to get a number. I'm trying to track down a resource that can report across the state of how many of these small businesses we've lost, but it's almost impossible to find the exact number. But I can tell you, in Columbus, where I live, we've lost over 50 bars and restaurants that were prominent names and probably very recognizable names.
50.
50, yes.
Wow.
50. And, in a city this large, 50 businesses isn't a huge number, but it really is when you think about, how many we've lost already. That's what scares me, is coming into the slower months for the bar and restaurant industry. This is a time where if bars are going to go out and restaurants are going to fail, it's probably going to be this time of year anyways, because it's tough to maintain good sales during this time anyways. And on top of that, the bar and restaurant industry came into the initial shutdown last year financially pretty sound and secure. So a lot of the businesses had, some money built up and they could survive that first shutdown. Now, all of that money is completely depleted. I know Amy, for example, at the Knollwood Tavern there in Beaver Creek, where you're at, has had to actually start selling off personal possessions of her own.
Oh, Lord.
She's had to dig into her savings account just to keep the lights on and her staff employed. Even doing all that, she's still behind on some of the bills because she's not bringing enough revenue right now. So we are absolutely going to see mass closures of bars and restaurants across the state in the next couple of months here.
Yeah, that's what I'm very afraid of, and that's why I wanted to have you come on this podcast and talk about the seriousness of and how it's impacting all these bars and restaurants. The small business owner is having a tremendous time trying to keep up, because I know bars and restaurants work on a shoestring budget. They try to provide the best they can. Are they receiving any of the CARES Act funding?
Some are and some are not. So, for example, Amy, who owns Knollwood Tavern there in your neck of the woods, she did not qualify for a lot of the financial aid that was out there last year because she started her business on, March 15th. She intended to, but got shut down the same day. But she didn't have any, history of sales or history of payroll or anything to go on. So Small Business Association denied her the loans. She got denied PPP loans. She got denied basically everything. I met with another bar just this evening up in Findlay, Ohio, and they opened 2 weeks before the shutdown last year, and they're in the same position. And even worse than that, because the Liquor Control Commission is so far behind on their paperwork, they still don't have their liquor license in their name now. It's still in the previous owner's name. They've applied, they've sent in their check, they've sent in an application, but none of their paperwork has been processed. So that makes them completely ineligible to even receive the $2,500 that the government is offering right now to liquor license holders, because that liquor license is not even in their name yet, and it's not even their fault.
So why are the liquor licenses so behind? Are they attributing it to the pandemic?
The office that handles all the liquor licenses, as soon as COVID went into effect, the shutdown and lockdowns across the state, they were all working remotely, and no one was in the office to process any of this paperwork. Now, when you receive a paper check and a paper application for a renewal of a liquor license or a transfer of a liquor license, that has to be processed in person. There's no way that they can maintain staff at home doing this. And so for months and months and months, this mail piled up in their office, and no one was touching it at all. Pretty much everyone in Ohio is working on an expired liquor license right now, if you look at what's on their wall, because their applications for renewal haven't been processed because it's just sitting in tubs of mail at the Liquor Control Commission. Wow.
And are they back in the office, or are they still working from home?
My understanding is that most of them are still working from home. They have brought, I think, one or two people into the office now, maybe a month or so ago, to start processing these applications and cashing these checks and such. But they're so far behind. I mean, they're processing stuff from like May and June of last year that got mailed in. They're not even close to being caught up right now.
So if someone wanted, like, they ran into a bunch of money and they wanted to start a business, or they had their mind set on opening a restaurant, is that even possible right now with something like that? Can they even get started?
Well, first of all, I think it is possible. We have seen bars and restaurants open this year. Okay. But I wouldn't recommend it this year.
Right.
Everything going on, this is not the time where you want to take that kind of gamble. It's a tough business anyways. Like you said, the profit margins are very thin. It's a very competitive industry, and it's tough to make it even in good times. So this year, I certainly wouldn't recommend someone to do that. But I know of a few bars and restaurants that have started in Columbus during the middle of all this. So I would assume that some of that stuff can get done right now, but it's just a very, very slow process.
Okay. So you were talking, you're working with different legislators to help write different bills and things. Are you familiar with House Bill 311?
Yes, I was at the State House several times over the last several weeks here, trying to lobby our state senators to get that veto override voted on. Right. That turned out to be a disaster, though.
Yes, it seemed like I think it was the Senate President Oboff that kind of stalled it, or what was that?
He absolutely did. So it was Senate Bill 311, like you said. It started in the Senate, and for your listeners who may not be familiar with what this bill is, Senate Bill 311 would limit the health department and prevent them from quarantining people that aren't actively sick, and it would also prevent the health department and the governor from introducing new mandates and orders that overstepped boundaries. Maybe that's not the right way to put it. It would allow them to continue to put out orders, the governor and the health department, but it gave the Ohio legislature an oversight on those orders. So if they thought that the governor or the health department was overstepping their boundaries, or what they were trying to do was going to cause more damage to people than it was going to help, they could shut it down and stop that order. So it gave the power of, like, I like to call it a jury to our legislature. And they could look at that and say, okay, that's a good order. That can help our citizens here in Ohio. Or, hey, wait a second, I think you're going too far on this one. let's rethink this. We're going to block you from being able to do this. So it was vitally important that this bill got passed. Of course, it passed in the Senate. It passed in the House. The governor clearly vetoed it. He doesn't want any restrictions on his power right now.
Right.
So it got sent back to the Ohio legislature. And Senate President Obhoff promised Ohioans, as soon as it got vetoed, that they were going to override the governor's veto. He made a solemn promise to Ohioans that they would override the veto. And he failed on that promise. He stalled it out and basically ran the time clock out to the end of the year when the legislative session was over, and didn't take a vote on it.
Yeah, it was. It's very unfortunate. Unfortunate. I don't own a bar or a restaurant, but I feel for all these people out here. I heard, or I watched the last post oppressor that you guys just put out, which is great information. What is the Facebook page? Understanding COVID Data as well? Is that?
Yes. So one of my co-hosts on the broadcast is Catherine Hewig. Who's amazing, by the way. I love working with her, and she's just got a brilliant mind, and she's got an excellent way of breaking down all the data and explaining in a way that everyone can understand. And
definitely.
Her site on Facebook is called Understanding Ohio COVID-19 Data. And
you all work together, or are you associated with that page as well, or just Ohio Bar Hop?
Ohio Bar Hop is my page. Understanding Ohio COVID-19 Data is her page. One of my other co-hosts, Dr. Frank, his page is Follow the Data with Dr. Frank. So we all work together on the Post Oppressor show, but we all kind of come to it from our own angle, and we all represent kind of a different facet of information we're bringing to the table for our discussions.
Definitely. How did you guys get together?
We've all been working on our own things to kind of rebut what the governor has been doing and fight against what the governor has been doing all year. And it literally was through happenstance that we all got together. I've met a lot of people throughout the year that have seen my work or I've seen their work, and we contact each other and say, hey, I like what you're doing. This is what I'm doing. Maybe we can help each other out here. And that's kind of how it happened. And we all came together to form this group, and we decided we're going to start doing a broadcast directly after the governor's press conferences to tell the other side of the story and show Ohio what the governor is saying is not 100% truthful sometimes, and it's not 100% disclosure of what the real story is. There's things that are being covered up and not shown, and we want to bring light to all that and show what's really happening.
Right. I watch a lot of the governor's press conferences, and there's a lot of political theater. There's a lot of exaggeration, if you will. Not all the time, but sometimes. So
I don't think he ever comes out and flat out lies.
No.
I would never say that, but the way he talks is not 100% truthful sometimes. Lie by omission is still a lie, and a lot of times he omits information that's pertinent, that would be very helpful for people to understand, and he doesn't tell that part of the story, and that's what we're trying to show people.
Right. So when you guys get together like this, and you put out, I guess, dissenting ideas, perhaps that go against what Governor DeWine has said on the press conference, are you guys receiving much pushback from either outside folks or government in general?
All of us that are involved in this have definitely gotten pushback this year. We've all stuck our neck out and said, by the way, we're all just ordinary citizens.
Right.
I'm just a bartender. Catherine, who's our data genius, she's a swim coach. Dr. Frank is an educator. We're just regular citizens, but we saw what was happening is wrong, and we stuck our necks out there and said we have to speak up against it. And we've certainly gotten pushback. But what I have found, and it's been encouraging to me, there's been a lot of people that at the very beginning of this disagreed with me fervently, that They thought the bars and restaurants should just be shut down completely and no time given to bars and restaurants to be open because it was just way too dangerous. And over the course of the last several months, exposing what I've exposed and showing what I'm showing, I've won a lot of those people over. And it's because I try to present things in an honest way. I don't hide or obfuscate anything. And I don't talk down to people in the way I present the information. I think it's important that the whole truth comes out and it's done in a way that people can relate to and understand. And so I've tried to do that very hard. I've tried to be non-judgmental, but just really show what's happening.
Right, and in a time where it's really difficult to disagree, it's okay at times to disagree. And as citizens, you have that right to redress your grievance, or however anybody wants to put it, against government who sometimes overreaches, in my opinion.
Certainly. And there have been plenty of times where I will give the governor credit for something, because it's not a me against him mentality here. I just want, number one, the truth, and I want justice. And I want to fight for what I believe is right, and that's for my industry is that we're safe places. And we have been this entire time, and we're being persecuted because of it. So the governor and I may have several disagreements, but I don't hold any hard feelings towards them, and I will just, when he does something well, I'll give him credit for it. But we certainly disagree on the bar and restaurant situation.
Understandably. So I was going to tell you about, I don't know if do you have, maybe I'll ask a question, I guess, here. Do you have the bars, are they all connected through Ohio Bar Hop? Are they able to connect with each other? Because if I'm remembering correctly on the last post oppressor, you were talking about some of these bars were looking, or restaurants, were looking to buck this curfew a little bit. They wanted to maybe, I don't know what the best word, they didn't want to adhere to the curfew. There might be some folks desperate, okay, because that's what happens when they get desperate. They got to do that. Are they all connected in any certain way? If something like that were to happen, that they could have other folks out there to come out and support them, or...
At this point, there's really, I'm not a technical genius, and making those kind of connections available to people would take a lot more expertise than what I have. A lot of them are connected through my Bar Hop page, in that they can see what I'm doing and they can comment on things, and they can, see other people's comments and maybe, see another bar going through the same struggle and message them as well. But there's really no massive connection other than I'm trying to spread the same message on our behalf on my page. That being said, there are bars right now that are very desperate. They are about to go under, and they feel like they're not going to make it much longer, and they are starting to get to the point where they can't afford to stay closed past 10 o'clock anymore, because those, let's be honest, those are the prime hours for a bar. And if they don't start rebelling against this 10 p.m. curfew, they're just going to go out of business anyways. The bar I talked to today told me that if the governor comes out with another shutdown, she's not going to shut down because she's going to lose anyways. So they have a choice: go out fighting or go out, laying on the ground, whimpering.
Right.
And a lot of them are saying, I'm going to go out fighting. What's the worst you can do? Take my liquor license, close me down. I'm going to close down anyways if I don't do this. So we're starting to see that pushback from the businesses right now. And it's interesting because this is just now hitting Ohio. It really hasn't happened in Ohio up until the last week or so here, at least on a larger scale. It's been happening in other states that have been more severely locked down across the country, and it's finally reaching Ohio now. But the businesses feel desperate, and they feel like there's nothing else they can do but to have to defy this. And this is not something we revel in doing. We don't enjoy breaking the rules. Most of us are good, honest citizens, and we want to follow the rules. But it's come to a point where I can't pay my bills anymore. I can't keep my staffs employed. I can't pay them paychecks anymore unless I do something. And this is about the only thing they can do.
Understandable. Hopefully something will be done in the legislature up there at the State House where they could maybe get a bill passed to where they can have oversight over the governor. That is so important, having oversight over the governor, and then us as citizens being oversight of the government. That's what it's supposed to be. So I was...
Oh, for sure. It's so important for the legislature to have this position anyways, because constitutionally they really have this power to begin with. But
they do.
To have it explicitly written into a bill regarding health emergency orders is something that's also important, because the legislature is the body of government that is most accountable to us, the people. They represent a very specific group of people in their district. They're not,
yes,
in some distant capital all the time. Most of the time they're in their districts living their lives. So they are definitely most accountable and most in touch with the people, and to have that oversight is so important. If you think about it, we've been living for over 9 months now, quite literally under the rule of one man, and that's Governor DeWine. And he has had absolutely no check on his power. So basically anything he's wanted to do this entire year, he's done and gotten away with. And you can argue that a lot of it has been good, and it probably has been. And I think him taking action has helped a lot of people in some ways. But there comes a time where power corrupts people, and power is not a good thing for one person to have, and we need oversight.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Something like that.
Certainly does.
We're getting pretty close to time here. Is there anything you want the people listening to this podcast to know? Are there any folks out there really struggling, that maybe some restaurants or bars that we could go visit? Any of that?
I would say that right now, no matter what part of the state you're in, there are bars and restaurants that are small businesses, mom and pop owned, that are struggling. I don't have a comprehensive list of all of them, but you know your communities better than I do. So
right.
Go visit them. Spend your money at small local business, because they need your help now more than ever, especially coming into the new year with January, February being slow months. They need your help desperately. And we're going to need the public's help coming into the next couple of months too, especially with some of these bars deciding to buck the curfew and say, you know what, I'm going to still do everything to protect my patrons with social distancing and mask wearing and whatever in my community, but I can't stay closed past 10 o'clock anymore, so I'm going to stay open. And we need the public to embrace that, and we need the public to come out and say, we support you. We're going to come out and we're going to support you after 10 o'clock, and we're going to help you fight this.
There was something I saw a while back, and that's kind of why I brought it up. It's something called the Liberty Bell system. I don't know if there's anyone out there, or if you can find someone out there that can create a text app where you put in your email or give a phone number, and then you can collect all that and then send it out. Say, Aaron's Tavern is going to stay open past 10 and they're going to need folks there. You send out a mass text and folks can show up to help with that essential protest, is basically what it is. But it
is a protest. And it's a protest not just for the sake of protesting. It's a protest to save our livelihoods.
Yes.
And if I may, 585,000 people in the state of Ohio work for bars and restaurants. That's a lot of people.
That is.
It's just shy of 60% of a million. So it's a lot. And a lot of these people are going to be without jobs very soon if things don't change very quickly. So this is a desperate plea and a desperate call from all of us that we need help, and we need the public support.
Definitely. Aaron Crater, is there you want to go ahead and give folks your information one more time before we end the podcast?
Certainly. So you can find me on Facebook and YouTube. All you have to do is search for Ohio Bar Hop, And you can also find me on the Ohio Post-Oppressor, and that's on Facebook. We do a broadcast every time the governor does. About 15 to 20 minutes after the governor wraps up his press conference, we come on and do a rebuttal to that. And if any bar or restaurant out there is in need of help and needs representation and feels like their voice is not being heard, I encourage them to get a hold of me directly. They can do that on the Facebook page by hitting the message button. And they can also reach me directly on my phone line, and they can reach me at 614-290-7375, or they can email me at ohiobarhop@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate you coming on to Truman's Town Hall.
Thank you so much for having me, and I wish you all the best.